Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the program. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Thank God it's Friday. We're turning our attention to some very important issues this morning. We'll be talking about the scheduled APC National Convention for February. We're hearing some news that that particular convention might be postponed given the need to complete reconciliation for challenges that came up after the state congresses. We'll be looking at some of the issues in that light in the second half of the show. But let's begin with issues around insecurity. On Wednesday, the federal government finally gazetted the court order proscribing bandit groups in Nigeria. I'm joined this morning by a lawyer and Director General, International Institute of Professional Security, Tony Ofoyeton. Good morning and thank you for finding time to come.
Good morning.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year, Nigerians.
Yes, so prior to Wednesday, you remember that the federal government had secured this order as early as November last year, and many people have been asking why the delay, because for IPOB, the proscription was done on the same day. For IMN, it took about 3 or 4 days to have it done. But the Attorney General of the Federation was quoted a few days ago to say, to have said that government was ensuring that it does this along global best practices. How is this one different from the previous ones that we witnessed earlier?
Well, let me start by saying it's better late than never.
Yeah.
So that it has come, I think that's laudable enough. But let me also play a little bit of the devil's advocate now. In the case of the IML and the case of IPOB, there was no international weaponry, as it were, purchase and use like we have in the case of a deployment. I'm talking of the deployment of the Tucano.
Okay.
Yes.
Tucano jets.
Yes. Vis-a-vis the fight of bandits and the like. Don't forget that they said that one of the conditions of deployment of bandits is that it of the Tucano is that it will not be used against bandits, but exclusively against terrorists and terrorism generally. So if you look at it from that angle, I think reading the mind of the Attorney General of the Federation. But personally, I also think that this is also something that ought to have been done as early as maybe just a few weeks after obtaining court order which declared the terrorist organization, bandits, as terrorist organization. Don't forget that before that, National Assembly on 2 different occasions had called the federal government to do same. Different organizations, different entities all over the country had called the federal government to do the same. Now, if you look at the way the federal government foot dragged, now before even going to court, so it is not surprising that they also foot dragged before even talking about gazetting it. So I said I played the devil's advocate, trying to and actually struggle to try to see with the view of the Attorney General of the Federation. But the truth is that as it is now, knowing full well that politics is just around the corner, and everything that would stand on the negative list against the government, as much as they can, they want to see if they can write in it. Everybody is unanimous about the fact that the bandits are terrorists. And there is, in short, I know that there are some of us that hardly call them bandits again, because we know the signature are the same. And there's no reason for us to deceive ourselves.
You're not in any way suggesting that the proscription of bandits is a political score for the Buhari administration?
Well, it is expected to be a political score, but as it is now, it is not. Because it's coming at a time where people are like, if you like, do it. If you like, don't do it. That's your business. You know, that mentality, that mindset is already there. So we expect that you hit the iron when it's very hot. As it is now, look at Nigerians. Recently, the governor of Katsina State called its citizens to defend themselves. And that is the president's state of origin. For goodness sake, what does that tell you? That the average Nigerians and governors are fastly losing faith in this administration, especially when it comes to the deployment of security to the fullest. And it is not because the security personnel are not ready to work or that they are not capable. It is because the people you have at the helm of affairs that will take the fundamental decision before those that would have to go and execute it, they are not. A lot of politics is affecting security. And like I've said severally here, that politics and security don't go pari passu. They are two different things. Unfortunately and painfully, politics controls security. And that is the negative effect we are having.
How does a change in name from banditry to terrorism, in some way change the rule of engagement? What kind of impact do we foresee going forward?
Well, it will definitely change the rule of engagement. Those that have come openly, for example, to support, directly or indirectly, the bandits, asking us to pacify them, asking us to see reason with them, will have to renege. That
because they're now culpable to be charged for treasonable acts.
Yes. You actually become a participis criminis, as it were. Apart from the fact that the approach when it comes to military assault will be absolutely different as it is now. Now you are talking of the deployment of the Tucano jets, for example, which hitherto could not be deployed against bandits, but now can be deployed against whosoever is within that terrain. Whether you call them bandits, you call them Boko Haram, whatever name you call them now, can come under that definition, and they now become, beneficiary of that military assault, as it were. Now you also see that when they are arrested, now they will be treated purely as terrorists. They will be prosecuted as terrorists and not just as mere bandits. So the narrative is actually different in all its ramifications. And maybe that is also one of the reasons why those that are protagonists of these young men are saying don't do that and all those stuff like that. But I think it is a good idea.
How much caution do you expect that we also imbibe in the use of maximum force? Because I've heard the Kaduna State Governor say things like, let's bomb them, let's introduce maximum force. Because in the onslaught against terrorism, we have recorded some civilian casualties, and they tell you that it happens and everything is fair in war. But how do we ensure that in defeating them, we also do not cause more damage to the citizenry?
I think the first thing should be, who are those that are in charge of the proper coordinates that those on the field will use in their military assault? Don't forget that we've had several I don't know whether to call it friendly fire or to call it, mistake, where you have Air Force jets going to bomb IDP camps. It happened on 2 different occasions, which was a very big disaster. Now the question is, those that are going to man this Tucano, whether they have the professional competence, those that are going to give them the intelligence, the coordinates, whether they are also, have the professional capacity to do that, which I believe. But it has to be well monitored, knowing full well that a lot of mistakes have happened in the past. Now, because if that happened, you will now see that the justification of those that are saying don't deploy it, they will now begin to tell you, we told you that it should not be deployed. So we want to be sure that those that are going to operate it are not moles. They are well vetted, well screened, and they are not participants criminis. They are not sleeper cell that are sympathetic to the cause of terrorism. So these are things that the military formation must convince itself before asking anybody to have access to such. Now the issue of casualty and the like, I must say very painfully that no matter the analysis, no matter how you think you have concluded your intelligence and the like, in situations like this, there will be casualties. But the issue is, what's the volume? It should be done in such a manner that it is to the barest minimum. No human life is invaluable. That means that it doesn't mean even if it's one person that is innocent, it is a painful one. That means the government should now, those that are that aim of affair, should ensure that as much as they can, get zero, collateral damage. Get as much as you can, zero of such. And if they get their intelligence right, and if they get their personnel right, and if they're able to remove the moles among them, they will always succeed. And I say with all emphasis, the military will always succeed. But if they did not do a good job, their intelligence is defective, and they allow, counterintelligence to also affect their own intelligence, at the end of the day, it will lead to ambushment, it will lead to sabotaging of the Kano, even the so-called gazetting of the gang bandit. Because what will happen now that the bandit has been gazetted is that they will want to show that they are superior. It's always, that is one of the signature of the terrorists in most cases. You want to challenge them, they want to tell you that, look, we are capable. Whatever nomenclature you call us, whether you call us terrorists, or you call us headers, or you call us bandits, whatever you call us, we are capable. So be expecting that they will definitely, make an attack. Now, to what extent is DSS able to do a risk identification, risk analysis of all this, and if possible identify most probable areas, and that will be a product of what information they have, reading the mind of the terrorists. You don't even need to be a soothsayer in some of these things, so if they are able to understand that very fact very well, then they'll be able to take a proactive step. If not so, what you will see will be a reactionary response.
Or like the Boko Haram and ISWAP that we know, who would rather destroy and even undergo suicide bombing and the rest. The mainstay of the bandits is abduction. And then when you follow the story Zamfara, every week they're always releasing some individuals who are captive. I mean, there was a sad news last night of a woman, a 40-year-old woman who was released after months in, as a victim, but lost her 2-year-old child. Don't you foresee that this will be a bit more difficult, given that these bandits usually would have victims around them? I mean, those who they have abducted.
No, you see, the first thing is the fact that the law has been made, is being gazetted, so to say. Now, if you understand terrorism financing, you will find it easy to link Boko Haram with the bandits and the herders. Now, look at it. Boko Haram, if you ask yourself, what is the central agenda of Boko Haram, you will struggle to be able to identify it. But it's been in existence for the past 10 years or thereabout now. Now, if you look at the need finance, now you look at the bandits you have identified now, what do? They basically raise funds through kidnapping, either group, mass adoption, whatever. Through kidnapping, they raise funds. What do they do with the fund? Then, of course, you look at the headers. They talk about land, acquisition of land and all those stuff like that. So if you bring all this together, you are going to link all together and see that there's most probably a central command. And all this working together as a team in different cells to achieve a central goal. So that means that the DSS, the government and the like, they understand all these things. And they are dealing with them cell by cell, group by group. But I just hope and believe that over time, they will be able, once they dissipate, each of these groups on their individual basis and weaken them, it will affect the other groups. But it's a product of the political will of Mr. President. It's not enough to say we have gazetted it. The body language so far has not convinced some of us that Mr. President is very enthusiastic. But he has men that are very enthusiastic. And those men cannot work except he is able to push them. Give them that body language. Give them that authority to say, go. Look, the type of terrorism we have in this country is more of a politically motivated, political interest terrorism that is very easy. I'm sorry to say. Somebody may say that I'm not in the military, but I've been able to interact with military at different level. And I will tell you that the only thing that is lacking, that is prolonging this terrorism today in Nigeria, is political will. If the political will is there, and they see the body language of Mr. President, and they say if in the next 3 months, clear them. I tell you that the military you have, you'll be proud of them. But they cannot do anything except you ask them to go ahead and do it.
Now, when you talk about body language, we've seen the president organize committees in response, for instance, to banditry in the Northwest.
My brother,
top intelligence officers.
White Elephant Project. If you want to kill any vision in this country, set up a committee.
I'm just wondering what body language is louder than saying to the military to end this crisis within the limited time possible.
Now let's look at it from this angle. There have been a lot of lapses, are you there with me, in prosecution of the war against terrorism in this country. How many times have you seen those that were indictable being indicted? How many heads have you seen roll? It's a simple thing. If you employ somebody to do something and it's not doing it, and there are a lot of fallouts, you know, then you look at the case of General Adebayo also, that came to say that they gave them raw coordinates that led to the ambushment. And what happened to General Adebayo? He was redeployed, maybe court-martialed, and they did the whole thing, because according to them, they have rules as far as social media is concerned. You have heard of situation where grand commanders, theater commanders were attacked even by the troop on the condition that they were not giving that their welfare, or alternatively, they were not given enough arms and ammunition to prosecute the war. You've heard of governors coming to say that these guys are not well armed and all those stuff like that.
Let me hold you for a minute to take Olawale's call from Ikorodu. Good morning, Olawale.
Hello?
I can hear you. You're live now. Please go ahead with your contribution.
From Ikorodu. Yeah. I want to make a slight contribution to your discussion.
All right, go ahead, please.
Yes. Let me tell you, don't let us deceive ourselves in this country. Yes. Before he left the theater of war in Maiduguri, he categorically told us that the insurgency will last more than 20 years. Then secondly, of recent, he said...
Oh my, we lost that call.
You're talking about Bratai.
Yes, who
former chief of,
talked about how long. But let us take a look at some of government policies and see if they are not working in cross purposes. For instance, we hear terms like repentant bandits, and it's one of the strategy of the Zamfara state government to speak sense to these individuals, have them lay down their arms and release the victims in their custody. There's also what looks like an amnesty program for Boko Haram members at the federal government level. On one hand, we're applying force. Is that the stick and carrot approach, and how effective do you think it is in this kind of guerrilla warfare?
Well, so far so well. Actually, in some other crimes, what you use those set of people for are basically for the purpose of information, and maybe for the purpose of, being able to lead you to certain routes and all those stuff like that. But the Nigerian case is a little bit different, because if you look at recently, we had some repentant Boko Haram misbehaved, let me use that word, and of course it became a boomeranging issue. For now in this country, it is demoralizing to talk about repentant bandits or repentant terrorists. Why don't you allow them to go through the instrumentality of legal prosecution? Why don't you allow the law to declare them as being guilty? At that point in time, if you want to grant them amnesty, if you want to forgive them, then you cannot take the next step. You understand? Look, can you imagine that you are a soldier, you went to war, you understand, and right in your own very presence, your colleagues were killed, some of them butchered as meat unfit for even food. Now you survived it. You survived it with one of your legs chopped off, one of your hands chopped off, and you now came back after 6 months only to say you have the same set of people that attacked you, killed your colleagues as banned as repentant Boko Haram or repentant militant, and they are being given presidential treatment. Some of them are now going to be sent abroad, maybe for skill acquisition. Some of them are now going to be restrained or brought in. It doesn't work like that.
Hold that
it would demoralize
Hold
those
that thought for a
there.
minute. Let's take Best Man's call from Warri. Good morning, Best Man.
Good morning. I've been watching your program. You see, there is an adage in my place that says, in order for you to kill a tree, you need to kill it from the taproot. You need to kill the root. What is happening to insurgency in Nigeria is this. We need to look for those that are sponsoring these things. There are people sponsoring. Not until you start prosecuting those people so that those funds will not go back to them. Not until you do that. Whatever we are doing shall be in vain. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Certain names and businesses were published recently, and we're looking forward to, prosecution taking place thereafter. But one of the successes of the military last year was the huge number of repentant terrorists, particularly, foot soldiers, their wives and their children. I'd like us to think of it from the logical point of view. Did it in any way help the military's war against insurgency from what we witnessed in northeast Nigeria in 2021?
I don't think so. I don't think so. If you are talking of if it has helped, then we'll ask ourselves if the spate of terrorism in this country has drastically reduced as expected. Instead of reducing, you now have them changing different strategies and styles and all those stuff like that. You now have our budget, our defense budget going up. We are now thinking of acquiring more arms and ammunition. And the painful thing is that we are fighting against ourselves. That's the painful and sorrowful thing. It's not an external aggression. It's Nigerians fighting and killing themselves, and also using outsiders to come and kill fellow Nigerians, and some other Nigerians defending the act of the killing, and sponsoring the act of the killing, like he said. And if you look at today, if you ask yourself, Nifemi, if you ask, can you conveniently say you can drive from here to Delta, to Abuja, without the fear of being kidnapped? So it's not, yes, I agree that so if that, you look at some
I have heard the narration. Some would say that what happened in 2021 was that we saw some gains in the area of the fight against insurgency, particularly in the northeast. But what the challenge would be the issue of banditry in northwestern Nigeria?
For northeast, yes, I think to a large extent, the military has done relatively well in the northeast, relatively well. There's no doubt about that. To the extent that their level of bombing, their level of attacks in villages, even to Maiduguri at a time, to Unimade at a time, if you remember, has drastically reduced. To the extent that even recently, one of the had to organize games competition and all those stuff like that. So to me, there's high level of success in Maiduguri, Borno State especially. But look at it the way it's shifted. It's shifting. The Sokoto that used to be very peaceful. And
you're saying that there's a connection between the insurgency and banditry?
Well, just look at it yourself.
Let's take Mazi's call. Is it still there? Good morning.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Nifemi. Good morning, my brother in the studio.
Good morning, sir.
You see, the issue we are facing now is that I agree that the federal government has gazetted the issue of this kidnapping, named them. But the question is this: our lawyers, are they ready to do the needful? Because it is not a question of carrying somebody to court under the act of terrorism by the police. Now, what are the relevant lessons? Now let's revisit a case of this my man, what's his name, the kidnapper. And now what happens to him? Up from now this year, I've seen how many years the case is still lingering up to today. Now the act of terrorism we are talking about, is it people already in the cell or waiting trial, or the ones the police who grab any woman from now are the people that are going to face the new gazetted law? These are the things the federal government have to come out and tell Nigeria what are we facing, so that we know exactly who will be facing this act of terrorism.
Thank you.
Because
thank you so much for your contribution, Mazi. And I think you made another very important point here. If you prosecute all of the thousands of terrorists that you have arrested, do we even have the facility to imprison them? The jailbreak went to another dimension in the outgone year. Perhaps it's saying that are there other ways to address this challenge?
Legally speaking, the law does not act in retrospect. So those that have been arrested before now and were arrested as bandits will be prosecuted as bandits if the government decide to prosecute them. The law comes, it is those that are arrested after the law, takes effect, to the extent that they are now called or addressed as bandits, as terrorists rather, that will be prosecuted under the Terrorism Prevention Act. So it's that one there's no legal confusion in that. But as to the prison congestion and all those stuff, I think that is federal government headache. They can afford it within even 1 month. But we are not praying to rebuild more prisons. We are praying for a proper rehabilitation.
We're running off now. I recall that entering 2021, the call was, really loud to have the service chiefs changed. And then entering 2022, the call has been, let us call bandit terrorists, and we have them. What are your expectations as we go into this new year?
I was part of those that said, change the service chiefs. That's before these current ones. And the reason is because they have spent 5 years, not because they didn't do well. And I said that because the terrorists and the criminals had understood their signature for 5 years, understood their signature very well, that we need new people. And I also remember I added a caveat that Mr. President should leave these people to do it the way they know best. So at the end of the day, it is not the issue of whether we are changing them or not. It's the issue of the political culture that is on ground now, where an Attorney General of the Federation will be telling the National Security Advisor and the Service Chief what to do. That's a defective system. You are talking of a system where the NSA, the DSS, the Service Chief should be the exclusive voice when it comes to security, and not politicians.
Dictating what they should do, in your opinion.
Very well.
Dr. Tony Ofoyeton is a lawyer, Director General, International Institute of Professional Security. Thank you for talking to us this morning.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Once again, I wish you the very best this year.